Buckle up, Camp Pros, and get ready to launch into the future of summer camp with Camp Ahead. Camp Ahead helps Camp Pros think about the future so they're not caught off guard. Climate mitigation, heat, gender, war, demographics, economics, artificial intelligence. Are we ready as an industry? Camp Ahead, exploring the futurology of the summer camp industry. You can find our contact information and the many show notes from each episode at gocamp.pro/campahead.
Is creating your camp schedule a headache? Does it limit the experience of campers or staff? Campify is the software that does the heavy lifting for you, taking care of group, elective, and specialist scheduling based on your custom scheduling rules. Interested in learning more? Visit campify.io/campahead to schedule a demo or create a free trial today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Camp Ahead podcast. My name is Joe Richards, and I am one of your co-hosts on this podcast. I'm currently the executive director and have been for 20 years, so I don't know why I always say currently. I am the executive director at Pierce Williams Summer Camp and Retreat Facility in Fingal, Ontario, which is about halfway between Detroit and Toronto.
How's it going? This is Jess Roberts. I'm the executive director of Episcopal Camp and Conference Centers, which is a network association of about 95 Episcopal camp, conference, retreat farms across mostly North America, a little bit in Europe, and some in South America.
Hi, everybody. My name is KJ Williams, and I am the camp director and chief program officer at Phantom Lake YMCA Camp in Mugwanago, Wisconsin.
Okay, well, everybody, it is episode 7 of this journey on the Camp Ahead podcast. We are here today to talk about the idea of reviewing, updating, and engaging others in scenario planning. This is a topic that is important because if you're going to do scenario planning and you're going to utilize the book Imaginable by Jane McGonigal, which we have been basing this whole thing off of, which none of us have a physical copy close to our desk today, so we're not going to show it or hold it up.
I just have it memorized. So
you have it memorized. That's nice. Beautiful. Excuse my cough. The idea is that how do we keep it fresh? Meaning that it's not a one-time. There's so many activities that we do, be it in camping or in business, that happen, a vision planning exercise that happens one time, and then those ideas get either put in a binder on a shelf and not revisited time after time. How would you say, so set aside scenario planning, how would you recommend to keep something like this fresh or something like a visioning exercise fresh? Like what can we do in your minds to make sure that the people who need to see it and think about it are doing that on a regular basis?
Yeah, for me, I think it's really simple enough. I'm a visual learner, so my desk is covered in sticky notes, and that's just my remembering. But sharing an office or sharing a mutual space where your team is meeting or your stakeholders are walking in and out or your board is meeting, and just having some type of visual representation that is always up has always been really beneficial for me. As something to go back to.
I definitely think a way that we should always be focusing on what's going on is to be reviewing. If we're always reviewing, like let's say you just had a camp summer and you just end and you don't review the summer, you're kind of ignoring some of those things we talked about last week, these little pieces, right, that kind of stick out. But if you always decide we're always going to review, then you're always going to have things in your mind, and that will help you remember, like, from time to time, the things that we need to be planning for. And I think really if the world is always evolving, like our preferences for consuming things, our economic conditions, health, and environmental factors. And so we always, and I think camp is always trying to prepare to change with what's going on. But the reason this is so important is because it's helping us to not do it while we're treading water. It's to help us think ahead, to plan ahead so we're not treading when we get into a scenario that even if it's close to what we predicted, we're prepared.
Yeah, I think the idea of review and evaluate, this is one of the big things I've always said. We do a lot of staff evals at camp. And the same as a debrief or a review, if you don't evaluate staff, how are they going to know what they're doing, right? So We do it weekly, which is a wholly other side discussion and a whole other podcast about how to
Sure.
evaluate staff. But I love the idea of review, review, review. And I like the idea of visual cues, right? If we're going to
Yeah.
meet in a space to have things up. I was reminded about this recently when we did some future visioning with our staff team at our Monday management meeting. And I mentioned a building that I knew about that we have a concept drawing of. And they're like, what are you talking about? A 50-person eat, sleep, meet unit. I was like, oh, well, I have a giant poster of it in a closet because it was done in 2009. And it's just now it's out. Now it's sitting on an easel. People will see it every day. And I think about some of the stuff from this book and from I'm looking up at a 7 steps towards becoming a future ready organization. I'm like, oh, just make a small poster to put up somewhere in your office so people are thinking about, oh, here we are. Because like you, KJ, I have Post-it notes on the bottom of my computer screens, and the one says future readiness consultant, right? Like I would love that to be a task that camps can call me up and say, hey, can you walk us through some things on how to do this? So I love the idea of review and update any of the, and you use the word predict, and right, we're very conscious that we're not predicting a future, we're imagining a future. But I love the idea that if it comes anywhere close to something we've experienced in mental time travel, it'll be easier for us to be like, oh yeah, we got this.
And it's easy to pivot or shift because you've started to think through this idea or this scenario or this something even similar to it. Yeah, the visual thing is important. I'm a definitely visual and hands-on type person, and so I have a yearly calendar on my wall. So it's not just what's happening right now, because I need to see if I'm doing something this week with a meeting that might have an effect on something 6 months from now. And so I have that, and then I have a whiteboard. I used to use sticky notes, and I still have a couple. Like I have one on my screen that says, what's your return on investment? It's a reminder to me of everything I do. What is the return on the investment? Because sometimes I spend way too much time looking for the best flight, and that can be a waste of time. But then I've got the whiteboard, so I'm able to write down the things, and I always keep the things to think about, and then bigger things that I don't have time for, but I don't want to forget and I want to keep. And I don't, just like your poster that you're talking about, this drawing, I want these things to be in front of me all the time so I don't forget about them. And I don't put them in a closet, because I know that I have a closet of ideas that I haven't touched in 10 years, and they'll stay there, right? If I just keep that closet door closed.
There's a lot that to unpack in what you said, but like I feel the same visually. I look around my office and it is, as you can even just see from the back, you're like, imagine what the rest of the office is if this is not just one on one wall. But the other thing is this idea of Post-it notes, index cards. David Allen is a productivity guy who wrote a book called Getting Things Done. And he uses, one of the things in Getting Things Done is this list called Someday Maybe. So if you think of an idea and you're like, well, if you put it on a Post-it note and it's going to be in front of you all the time, you could have a whole section that's just someday maybe, right? Like it's unimportant if it gets done. It's an interesting idea. Let's put it on someday maybe. And I have a whole list in my to-do tracker and my list tracker that's just someday maybe, just crazy ideas that, and I have a ton of them that might never come to fruition, but are interesting things I can go and work on.
I think the big piece about this is that we learn that everybody has a way that they track things. And I know, so I'm 39 and I have spent years trying to find the right way for me to track things. I have used every app possible. I've paid for these, and I've used spreadsheets, and I realized, and I love technology. I'm a huge tech person, but I realized that for me, the best way for me is to handwrite things. And when I'm planning anything. And it took me until I was 39 to come to the realization that I need to stop with all this technology, because my brain, when I'm writing things down, I pause and I ground myself and I'm actually thinking through things. And so I think even just when you're thinking about future scenario planning or finding a place to organize how you want to save things, figuring out the way that works best for you. So that might be Post-its or index cards, and it might be creating spreadsheets. It might be a whiteboard, but figuring out what that is for you might be a great first step.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of discovery, and even as someone who's 51, there's still, this year I've gone back to paper and pen and an actual book. And none of it is perfect, and nor does life have to be perfect. So with scenario planning, that's the same thing. We're not looking for perfect. We're just trying to get people to expand their mind and expand the possibilities that they can see, because so many people have so little, maybe I'm saying this as so little creativity. Is this did I just offend people? KJ, you gave me
I think that's fine. Some people do have little creativity.
That doesn't mean you have skills in another area.
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
it doesn't.
Yeah, I'm not saying that it's. I have a magnet on my board that is that creativity is not an option; it's a necessity, right? But these are the things I put around myself all the time. I think with scenario planning, if you've come up with scenarios that have been engaging to your staff or to your team or to your stakeholders, that you owe it to them to continue to update those and maybe make this a weekly, not weekly, a bi-monthly or a bi-yearly, a couple of times a year to do reviews of those. We were talking before the podcast. I sat in on an Institute for the Future webinar with is it called the YUSA office, KJ? There's a couple of ladies from the YUSA who run a signals club where you come once a month. Is the way I understand it is you come once a month. It's a Zoom meeting. There's no action that needs to be taken. It's just an hour over lunch to talk about things you've found that are interesting, that make you go, about the future of your organization. And it's an activity that I am working with my board on right now, this idea, because signals of change has us think about the future in that way. So I have a variety of them in my system. And when I come across them, I often I enter them into a spreadsheet and go from there. And once again, like David Allen's idea of someday maybe, signals of change they just need to make my brain work a little. Summer camp directors, listen up. What if I told you there was a magical tool that could transform your camp scheduling chaos into a breeze? Introducing Campify, a camp scheduling platform making scheduling as fun as camp itself. Before you hit skip, hear us out. Campify isn't just another app, it's your new secret weapon to conquer scheduling chaos. Camps across North America wish they tried it sooner, and none would ever go back to scheduling the old-fashioned way. Every camp is unique, and it has its own special quirks. Campify gets that, and it works and thinks for you. It builds schedules based on rules that you set, and Campify offers much more than group scheduling. Campify's elective module gives campers personalized schedules. Say goodbye to last-minute changes causing scrambling and confusion. Campify's staff mobile app updates schedules in real time. Your time is valuable. Let Campify save you hours and make the scheduling effortless. Bring your camp into the future and discover the smarter way to schedule. Visit campify.io/campahead to schedule a demo. Create a free trial and claim 10% off your first year's license.
This just popped in my head, and I meant to say it last week, and I didn't, or last episode. There is a great board game that I have used in different types of planning, and it's called Ripple Effect, RIPPLEEFFECT. And it's a way of being creative with a team and like looking at a challenge or something. I think you could even take a key factor and start with it. And then you've got sort of like a dry erase and these little hex. If you've ever played like Settlers of Catan, they look like that. And you write things down and you connect them all to, so here's like, if it's, let's say, finance is the issue, and you come up with all the things that could happen that could go bad. and then you come up with ideas of things. So if you're more of like you want to work with a team and have more of a hands-on kind of visual thing, I'd recommend it. It's a really, really neat tool to have. It's called Ripple Effect.
And is it available on, you can get it pretty much anywhere, Jess?
That's
a great question. We'll look into that.
Probably, but it's made by some small company, so I don't know if I will look and I will let you know by the end of the episode.
Yeah, well, I want to go over one of the things. If you're going to engage your team or stakeholders in scenario planning, there are some other steps you can take first. You don't need to immediately give them a scenario to work within. Jane in her book talks about the idea of 100 ways something can change. So and I think it's a great first step. Last month, I'm not sure when we recorded last, but I had the honor of attending the ECCC conference that Jess invited me to. And I presented on future scenario stuff. And I realized in that session that, this might be too deep, too fast. And there's other ways to get people to think differently. And one of the ways is this idea of 100 ways something can change. So I did this with my board of directors last month. And what it is you come up with, what are 100 things that are true about your organization right now? And we got to like 37 things. We're affiliated.
Can you give a couple examples of what that?
Yeah, we're affiliated with the United Church of Canada. We have 158 beds. We run 6 weeks of summer camp program. We are located in Iona, Ontario. We are just true things. And then what the exercise challenges you to do is say, go 10 years into the future and make the so make the opposite of these things, right? So we're not affiliated with the United Church of Canada. We are located in Northern Ontario. We have, so from 158 beds, you could go either way. We have 300 beds. We have less. And then your activity is to think through what happened in the past 10 years to make those things come true, right? So if you're not located here, is it that heat and other things caused us to have to move? Right? If you had more beds, did you build new buildings and all of those things? It's actually outlined in the book in one of the earlier chapters, and it's a great exercise to start people with because it just bends their perception a little bit about a thing they love or a thing they have a stake in. And I think that's an easy way, even before signals of change, because I tried with my board to do signals of change first, but what happened is they got stuck on, they wanted signals of change and they just said things they thought of. And I was like, no, every signal needs an article, needs a link, right? So I'm looking at my signals of change right now on my computer. And some of the headlines are like the New York Times, well, we have to pump the Great Lakes to California to feed the nation, right? New climate map showed a transformed United States and it shows where flooding and other things would happen. The true effect of impulse control drugs, that has to do with like what we're now calling weight loss drugs, but really they're impulse control drugs. They're not weight loss is a leader to it, but like fascinating research. What if public housing were free for everyone? Or what if public housing were for everyone? Microsoft recently did a new quantum computing chip, and it could literally, no, it does literally change the face of computing. It does things we can't imagine. Or Camp Awakening closing because HIV drugs have made it unnecessary for HIV camps to exist anymore, right? Like these are the things I've put into my signals of change to make me think. I'm not sure. Do you ever get that, KJ, where you come across something, you're like, that's interesting. I wonder how that applies to me and to camp.
Yeah, for sure. While I was listening to you talk too, I thought about my position in middle management and where I have say or authority or more of a contribution to this conversation with my position. And I think about engaging in these scenarios with your young staff. And I think about programs I've done with literally my CITs about this, right? Like, if we change this in the schedule, it's going to affect this. So this doesn't have to be a conversation for just one group. And you know me, I'm always going to revert back to your summer staff because that's my pride and joy. But these are also conversations that can be on so many levels of your camp or your facility or your programs, right? How do the revoking of DEI initiatives, how is that going to affect the way we run camp this summer, right? How are the tariffs that are happening going to affect camp? That affects everybody across the board. Those are conversations you can have with your 19-year-old staff, right? It doesn't have to be conversations you're just having with your board.
And
so
I
that's
love
what I was thinking about as you were talking.
I love when you were talking about that, because I think there's a lot of leadership development that can come out of having these conversations. There's a lot of soft skills that you can help emerging adults, teenagers develop those while thinking ahead,
Totally.
which is a really, really neat way. And future scenario planning doesn't have to be on this big, giant scale, like you were saying. It can be something you could do with your family, or you could do with your life. Like, what does my life look like? What are my true statements? And 10 years from now, what will change some stuff, and like what will happen?
Absolutely. We utilize something for our program staff that we hire every summer that I think I heard about on the Camp Code podcast, but we put up better boards in everyone's office, and it's the same thing. It's that visual representation for all of our leadership staff that, oh, this didn't go well, what can we do better? And they write it down, and then we review it at the end of the summer to make changes for next summer. And I think that's a great tool as well.
And I think the other thing that I think about, KJ, is like this summer you can discuss those things because they're very fresh.
Sure.
I would actually go, what's 5 years and 10 years out look like if it tracks on the same trajectory? One of the things that Americans might not be fully aware of, and maybe you are, Canadians are pissed off.
Yeah.
Yes,
that there is a bully who's trying to pull grade 3 antics on the world. And one of the things that has happened is when we go to a store, a grocery store or whatnot, we're looking, okay, is this made in Canada? Is this a product of Canada? Where's this going? And once research shows that once you switch products, it's very rare that you go back to the other product. And so this idea of what is 5 years out, what is 10 years out, what does this mean for my position, right? For program supplies, what about 10 years from now, if we've lost access to buy anything from China, or if we've lost access to DEI, right, initiatives, in the sense of, I think a lot of my personal opinion is a lot of DEI stuff is doing zero harm to most people. It's doing really good to the communities that need it. And I don't understand. It's much like trolls on the internet. Why are you wasting your time commenting on this? Like, I don't, you must, I feel for you. You need love in your home.
Well, and I don't think people actually understand what DEI fully is. I think it's just a word that people are using, and that it benefits so many people. And to take away those things, it creates so much harm. There's no harm in us learning about other people and making things accessible. There isn't harm in that. But that's another podcast.
It is. I think to bring it back to this podcast is this idea of thinking 10 years out in any of those things. So in my board, when we started this work in January, my board was like, well, one of my brand new board members like, well, do you do some of this stuff with the campers? And I was like, no, but we certainly can, right? Like, and that would be awesome to talk to the campers about what does camp look like 10 years from now. And there's a gentleman that I discovered him through TikTok, and I forget his name, but he had this thing like, okay, well, write out 3 things you want to be true in 5 years. Whether they're true or not doesn't matter. And then you every morning write those 3 things down and write down something you're going to do today to help make them come true in 5 years. And he goes, is it tedious? For sure it's tedious. Does it keep it in the center of everything you do? For sure it does. And this is where I think that organizations that only dabble in this are not going to be as successful as organizations who make it part of their culture to ask the question. So every week or every month to ask my staff, okay, well, what does our future look like? What does, right? And to ask our summer staff and put it out there. I think that to create a culture is a culture that believes in change, and a culture that can do mental time travel to help us adapt to the things we're going to encounter that we simply don't know.
Yeah. You bring up such a good point. And I think I've said this a few times, but being self-aware. If, Joe, you're talking about doing staff reviews, and I often say with folks when they're doing the staff reviews, I say, do your staff review you as well. And is it a safe way to provide feedback? And how do you apply that? And I love asking the question to people, when is a time when one of your summer staff brought a concern or an idea to you and you implemented it or empowered them to implement it? Because that makes you think through, like, if I'm not willing to do that, I've got some work to do, right? Because we need to be willing to put the mirror up. We need to be willing to change and move and try new things. And this is a great way to help us think through that and be able to say, like, well, if these things we have no control over are going to happen, and we're imagining, how do we help now so that we don't get to necessarily that full outcome? But like you said, Joe, like you have to be willing to be flexible. You have to be willing to change. I know.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I know. So one of the things that I wanted to share with you all through this podcast, and I've been thinking a lot, our organization started and when it started, it was for executive directors to support each other. It was a small group, and it's grown. And I've been thinking a lot about how often middle management turns over. And it happens everywhere in all organizations. And I noticed in our organization, there isn't really a way to hear about that, like in a whole. And so I decided, well, I'm going to form a program council of advice that's going to provide feedback. And so that we can help troubleshoot, like, why do middle management folks stay for a year? Why do they only stay for 5? And I can make assumptions, or I can make predictions, or I can imagine why. But I thought, well, why don't I get a group of people that can kind of help think through some ideas? And so I've kind of got this group that I'm putting together to do some future scenario planning on middle management and supporting them. And it's been through conversations we've been having, and it's gotten me really excited to have this, to get input, and then to see what else is possible.
And KJ, I would challenge you, as someone who, I've heard you talk numerous times about the fact, I'm not this, right? I'm not here. But so much change can happen from below as well. And super, super important. I play this game with my program staff, more with myself. I don't let them know the game I'm playing, which is when they come and ask me for something, I have trained myself to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what it is, I'll repeat that in my head, say yes, because I can go through all of the future possible scenarios of this thing happening. And in my mind, I'm just like, let's play it out. Let's go. Right. This is a safe camp can be a very safe environment to let things go wrong in, and to let people fail in a where there's a lot of support. And I think that future scenario planning is not just a single level. I think it's an organizational thing.
Totally.
From your campers to your programmers, and they might think in different timescales, but like it's also something. How do we encourage, if we're not the person at the top of the, so you're talking, KJ's on this podcast with 2 executive directors. So if you're not an executive director, how do you see yourself playing this out at Phantom Lake and trying to change or create a culture of scenario planning and future thinking?
Yeah. Is it a rhetorical question? Or
No. It's a real question. If you feel comfortable answering.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly the point that I try to make every time we talk to, right, as a team, is there is so much that I have control over. Once the summer is rolling and there are kids on this camp, it is my job, right? And it is my program staff's job and my counselors' jobs and my campers' jobs to take care of each other. My executive director is doing his thing and getting us the funding and dealing with the budget, and we are rolling, doing the boots on the ground work, right? And so that scenario planning and this engaging in futuristic thinking is literally happening every day, right? What's the plan for next week? What's the plan for this schedule? How are we adapting to this specific child's needs, right? This is constantly happening. So that's why I always try to bring it back to that is I maybe don't think 5 or 10 years out because I'm thinking 1 year out or 2 years out or a month out, or once the ball is rolling in the summer, I'm thinking a week out. But I do think that there are benefits to thinking 5 or 10 years out. I just work so closely with our summer team or our seasonal team who, as we all know, right, our seasonal staff usually tend to do what, 2, 3, maybe 4 years if we're lucky. And then they're graduating college and going out into the quote unquote real world. So I think as middle management, that's where I take the conversations we're having and implement them into my career path for what I do right now.
It's so interesting too, because summer staff change every year.
Yes.
It's a completely different group.
Yes.
And so you could, at the end of the year, evaluate your summer, and then the next summer have maybe only half the staff or the same.
Yes.
And it's a completely different beast. And so that's a really interesting thing to think about. How do you plan ahead in a sense with what you can plan ahead with?
Yep.
Yeah. And how do executive directors support middle management in that? Because it is so rapid and so changing. How do we support middle management so that they feel like they can do that work?
Right. Is that rhetorical? Or do you want me to tell you all?
Kidding. If you have the answers, give me the answers.
I wish I did. It's so different. It's so different for every camp, right? So
I would think that there's also this idea of how do we, when we bring on new middle management, when we bring on new staff, how do we bring them into that culture of future thinking and scenario planning right away so they can better understand? Because so many people, especially if they're not camp people, come into a camp setting and just, if you didn't grow up at camp and you don't know what camp is in that sense, it's a different world. And so how can we make them feel included and get them thinking through the future thinking of camp? Because oftentimes what happens, this is the same reason that we don't. Years ago, a lawyer said to us, do not put people on contract. Because what happens is if you're on a 10-month contract or a 12-month contract every year for your position, what happens at month 10 or month 9 is you start thinking, oh, do I have a job in 3 months? Right? Like, am I going to continue here? Our lawyer, and we're in the province of Ontario, so labor codes are Ontario labor codes, I know. Our lawyer's like, you can just pay people to leave, right? Like, if at the end of 12 months you just don't, they're not a good fit, I think our labor code says you need to pay out 1 week of severance. Give them their vacation on the road and paid 1 week of severance and have a good day. Thanks. Bye. No cause. And I think that's a valuable way to think through scenarios, is this idea that if we only have, and this is where summer staff are challenged, KJ, right? If you're a new summer staff and you don't see yourself as coming back to camp the next summer, you're going to have a different take on things than if you were a camper at camp and now is your first year on staff and you and your mind have planned out your next 5 years on staff, right?
Totally.
And you can see your kids going to camp. You're going to have a very different take on that future scenario of how that applies to your camper in your setting.
100%. Yep.
That is great. I think that we've talked a lot about regular reviewing, keeping visual cues, how to engage your team and stakeholders. The book goes through actual plans of how to do those things with either the idea of 100 ways it can be different or signals of change, a signals club within your community. And then I think the one thing creating a culture of foresight is just making sure that all of those things are in place and talked about, right? How many times have you been worked somewhere where they say, oh, our culture is this, and you're like, no, it's not. It is not this. And how important it is for us to bring new people in and immediately get them into our culture. And I think this is what camps actually do a really good job of this, because they have such short staff training sessions for summer staff, that we know how to bring someone in and try to get them to buy into the culture immediately. So we just need to do that with more people. Any closing thoughts or other things people have been thinking about today?
I've been thinking about, like, how do you create that culture? I kind of wrote down a couple ideas. How do we create the culture of adaptability and encourage curiosity? And that kind of goes to Joe's not saying no. And it's a great improv mindset. So instead of saying no, curiosity, normalize change. If we as leaders show that change is okay in little tiny ways, then everybody knows it's not a threat, right? Reward adaptability. If somebody tries something new, shout it out, like give snaps, camp swag, whatever it is. Use storytelling. Give examples of how your space, your camp has successfully changed something. And I think those kind of things will help your staff or yourself or your board know that, like, right, we can adapt, we can be flexible, we can change.
Yeah. I love culture. Culture is my favorite part of camp, is building cultures. Don't get yourself caught in this echo chamber. Culture is subjective. Culture needs the opinions of 100 different people to figure out the culture, because everyone's going to interpret it differently. So I said, I think last time on the podcast, but I'm going to say it again, from campers to your highest donor and your board presidents and everyone in between, utilize all of those folks, or as many as you can, or as many opinions as you can when you are doing the scenario planning, and get those opinions from varying people.
Yeah, and everything bears repeating, KJ. So if you said it once, say it again.
Oh, I will.
Advertising works on that principle, that you're going to see something numerous times. Music works on that principle. Songs grow on you the more you hear them, right? Future planning, the more you hear it talked about within your organization, the more you're gonna buy into that and go through it. Creating a culture, a solid, positive culture, is ongoing work all the time. And I think creating this culture is the same thing. You just you normalize this idea of, oh, let's gather our signals of change here so that we can all review them, just to be like, oh, why did you put that there? And your answer can be, I don't know. It was an interesting article about the future of wind turbines, and that they don't need to be spinning, like that they can vibrate. And you're like, oh, fascinating. This is great. Good stuff. I think for today, that's sort of where we're at. It's as we go through this idea of reviewing, updating, and engaging others, I think the most important part is keeping people engaged, right? Giving them the feedback, the debrief, ask for follow-up, all of those things as we go. Because so often we do an evaluation and we never follow up with those evaluations. Yes. And so with future scenario planning, I think the idea of setting a regular time would work. I love how the YUSA has done like a monthly Signals of Change Club, where you don't need to be there every month, and there's no homework, right? You show up with one, you mention it, or you just sit and you listen to others bring theirs. So I think that's great. Yeah. I think that is it. Where can people follow up with you if they have any questions, KJ?
Sure. You can find all of my camp's information at Phantom Lake YMCA. That's our Instagram, our Facebook, our website. Or you can email me directly at kj@phantomlakeymca.org.
Jess?
Yeah, you can find all the information at episcopalccc.org, episcopalccc.org. And you can email me at jess@episcopalccc.org.
Now's your chance to give out your cell phone numbers, anybody.
I won't give out my cell phone number, but the Ripple Effect board game is only available on the website of the group that made it, which is called Ministry Downloads. The game is not Christian or anything like that. It's a secular game, but it was made by this group.
It's not inexpensive. It's $129 as I'm looking at it. This is in the show notes, so I'm sure that our producers will put things up. Just as a mention on this podcast, I want to thank our producer who's helped us out all season, Matt Wilfred, and congratulate him on becoming the executive director of the Canadian Camping Association, which is super awesome.
Woo!
Woo! So in the show notes, I put in the ripple effect game, and then Camp Code is always a great show note. You can always listen to Camp Code, and you can go all the way back to the beginning of Gab and Ruby and Beth and come all the way forward. There's still a ton of great information in there. If you want to follow up with me, I'm Joe Richards. You can reach me. You can find out all about Pierce Williams at campisbetter.com. And on our socials, we're Camp Is Better. And my personal email is joe@campisbetter.com. No cell phone today. You'll have to listen to the last episodes to get that. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.
Thanks for listening to Camp Ahead, exploring the futurology of the summer camp industry. Don't forget to check out our contact information and show notes at gocamp.pro/campahead. Camp Ahead is part of the Go Camp Pro podcast network. Find a podcast for camp pros of every age and stage at gocamp.pro/podcast. Hey Camp Pros, we love that our industry is built on sharing. In order to foster that spirit, we ask that whenever you get something great from a conference session, one of these podcasts, from the Camp Pros group on Facebook, wherever else, that you give credit where credit is due. That way, people can feel comfortable about sharing their best practices and continue to make all of our camps better. Thanks so much.